We are now in week 3 of the Elestrals Championship League Season 2, and I'm up against everything Elestrals, aka Moxie, piloting Fire and Thunder. First, going over the decks that I think that Moxie could bring, top of the list, it's Mill. He brought it the last 2 weeks. I know he really loves that deck, so I wouldn't be surprised if he runs it back for the 3rd week in a row, trying to win with the deck that he loves. Moxie bringing Mill is probably the best case scenario for me, just because the deck is really lacking in set 1 in my opinion, and he's missing a lot of really key pieces that helps make the deck a bit more consistent, such as Moltuga to search out the Humbusts. With that being said though, I wouldn't be surprised if he takes more of a hybrid Mill list that isn't fully relying on Mill just to be able to surprise me with a few other stuff, so I'm definitely going to still need to be on my toes and not just assume that this game's in the bag. What I'm really scared for is if he instead decides to pivot over to Thunder, just to kind of mix things up. And while I don't think he'll play Spark It just because he's not really that competitive of a player, he prefers to play his fun decks, Thunder's still a really rough matchup. As we saw last week against Wirtz, while I definitely didn't play the best, Thunder still does a lot, just much better than the other elements or even in 2-element pairings. Just the consistency tools with Spark It and Jolt and Defiant Stadium and Zeus, which gives them such great board control on top of all their other pieces, which gives them other great control options from Recovery with Quackle to Rune Control with Thunderstorm, and some great bombs at the top end with Sonicore, Galvenom, and Imperial from last week. It's a very daunting element to exist. Another option I could potentially see Moxie bringing is a Thunderfire Burn deck. From Thunder, he's got Toxion and Thunderbolt to Zeus, and from Fire, he's got Nekruff and Eruption just to try to burn me for game. And while, of course, I do run the Fire Spirits myself to try to play around Eruption, I could also see Moxie just using the control tools in Thunder, such as Boombat, to pop my Fire Celestial and just fire off those Eruptions for game. And since this is what I consider more of an ingenuitive deck than a cookie cutter like Good Stuff Thunder list, I could see it as a backup option that Moxie might want to bring, knowing that he prefers to play more fun decks than competitive decks. With all that being said though, I do expect him to play Mill, so my deck is primarily designed to counter Mill while also keeping Thunder in mind, because that deck is the most scary to me, so I don't want to be completely unprepared if he does pivot over to it. Getting into my deck list, I run 3 copies of each of the cards from the 5 Guys core that I have access to, that being Nekruff, Smoltuga, and Galaxy here. So this fits nicely into my game plan because I really want to keep Moxie off Humbusts and Cinders. The longer they stick around, the more value he can get off it, and the more likely I am going to lose to deck out. So therefore, just having some solid 5 attackers that can easily pressure those Elestrals, force him to use counter runes, or just lose it if he doesn't have those answers, I think is going to be the way to go. So Nekruff just innately at 5 attack is going to be really strong. Expending a Spirit also feels really strong into this matchup because Moxie's using his Spirits to mill me. I mean, he really doesn't want to have to lose extra spirits because that means less spirits for him to cast his cards to mill me. Galaxy is probably the weakest of the bunch, but it does synergize nicely with some of my other attackers just to be able to throw a slew of big numbers, though it does get answered easily by Gorgon's Gaze. And Smoltuga is here just to make the deck a bit more consistent, being able to find my Nekruffs for easy answers, because since Moxie doesn't have access to his own Smoltuga to search Humbust or Cinder, I do think I'll have some turns where I can safely just play out a Smoltuga, search out another 5 attacker to make sure I can keep up that pressure, but not throw out the 5 attackers when he doesn't have those cards on board that I want to attack over, pretty much conserving them for those crucial moments here. And obviously Smoltuga can be made a 5 attacker with Galaxy, but again, just have to be careful of Gorgon's Gaze. So continue this theme of powerful, somewhat efficient attackers, I run the 3 Mustachian here. Being able to flip its attack to 6 on its own, but also pairing nicely with Galaxy will be great, not only to pressure those Humbusts and Cinders, but also to pressure those Astrabbits, because being able to switch it to 6 attack can hit over an Astrabbit with Galaxy, still hits over an Astrabbit. Again, just have to be careful of Gorgon's Gaze in the Galaxy example, but thankfully if Mustachian hits in when it uses its effect, Gorgon's Gaze will not flip its attack back, though it still answers it at least, but doesn't have as big implications with Galaxy. So all in all, I just think this is a solid attacker for the deck. There's also a theme of consistent high attackers to keep pressuring the opponent's Elestrals. Mustachian takes a bit away from that as it has to expend a water, but I think that'll be a-okay because there won't be much pressure on my Spirit deck anyway, so I'll have extra Spirits to be able to utilize this effect. It's more so in the Thunder matchup where I do have to be a bit more wary and a bit more conscious of how I'm using my Spirits. And for the final 1-cost Elestral that can help pressure big numbers, it is Volcaris here, which notably can also be searched out by Smoltuga. So this one is a combo with a few other cards to help it hit relevant numbers, but at least against Cinder and the Humbust, this can easily hit over. Against either examples, it's going to be a 5 attacker. It really only needs to be a 4 attacker to hit over Humbust, and base power is a-okay to hit over the Humbust as well. Did I say Humbust twice? I meant hit over Cinder. The 4 attack is fine, 3 attack for Humbust. But also for the Astrabbits, I can if I have 2-card combos with some of my runes that you'll see, that can also help me hit over Astrabbits, just kind of keep the pressure on, keep him off of Elestrals, which is kind of the main idea, is just also swarm the board and just overwhelm Moxie as soon as possible. I do run a top end to the deck, and that is 2 Blazers and 1 Trifernal here. So only the 2 because I can't search them out, so I really don't want to rely on them like I did last week. But this is still a really cool tool to have access to. If Moxie ever gets up 2 Elestrals but can't answer one of mine, I can easily send to Blazerus, attack over both of them, and still ascend into Trifernal to hit him for big damage. If he has the answer, like, he's going to answer the Blazerus anyway, it's whatever. But that's great for pushing damage, clearing boards, but also I really like Trifernal into this matchup because it makes it so Moxie cannot stick a Humbust or a Cinder, so his main mill options, until he deals with this Trifernal. So if I can get this off, I'm going to be so happy, and I think it will be a near auto win unless Moxie does have the answer to it, which likely will be a resting on your laurels at that case. Though, notably, if he also has a shield later, that can do it, but also that's a lot of spirits just to deal with this Trifernal. But also, Blazerus is just going to be great for pressuring damage, as it being able to attack in twice means it can easily hit over Humbus, hit directly anyway, and just kind of keep pressuring that double attack turn after turn after turn. So, some great options up here if I ever draw into them, but really, this is just like the cherry on top, not the main strategy of this deck. Moving over to the runes, I run 1 Hammer of Hephaestus, 3 Hephaestus, and 3 Volcanic Forge. So these are the synergy cards with the Volcaries that I mentioned. Let's start with Volcanic Forge here, because I think this is going to be great to hit some relevant breakpoints with even just Nekruff. A Volcanic Forge and Nekruff hits over an Astrabbit, which is going to be the biggest defense body that Moxie has access to. So just being able to set up that and make it even harder for Moxie to keep Elestrals on board or deal with them is going to be great. Can buff up his own Nekruff, which isn't great, but I do have other options for that one as well, notably Volcaries, because Volcaries synergizes very well with Volcanic Forge, being able to hit 6 attack with just itself in Volcanic Forge. He hits over Astrabbit, but notably against Nekruff, it trades into Nekruff because Nekruff's Fire Spirit counts towards the Volcaries, putting it at a nice 7 attack to out Nekruff's 6 attack. So that just seems really strong. Hephaestus here also just to be able to pump up Volcaries even bigger if necessary, but also search out Hammer of Hephaestus. And the reason I really like this combo is because Moxie has access to both Kinleo and Boombat, 2 very powerful removal-based Elestrals. So not only does both these cards help buff up Volcaries if need be, but in a very opportune board state, I can always throw down a Hephaestus, search out the Hammer, set up Hammer, and just make it so that Boombat and Kinleo cannot out whatever Elestral is empowered by Hammer. Instead, they'll need either a Thunderstorm to deal with it, or they will need Resting on Your Laurels to answer my Elestral as well. So I can see that being a very strong play to make to just try to secure a board state and hopefully a game from there. Only 1 Hammer because really I'm just setting up with the Hephaestus. In terms of powering up the Volcaries, I really want to focus on Volcanic Forge and maybe a Hephaestus. Also, I don't want to just be throwing out runes like when my Moxie has out Humbust. I don't want to be playing runes to play into the mill. So ideally, I'll be looking to set these cards on a turn without Humbust on board, which also with Humbust only being 1 attack, 2 defense, I shouldn't need the attack buffs from these cards overall. But Volcanic Forge I think is huge with Volcaries, hence why I max it out, and Hephaestus as well. This one arguably can be cut down, but I do think that it also has relevant applications with my side deck, and then also helps out Volcaries to boot and can help find out my Hammer as well. So I think 3 copies, while it might not be necessary in the mill matchup, I do think it is a-okay as well. And yeah, of course, if Moxie mills Hammer, it's going to suck. So really, this is just if he also hasn't milled it, I'll be able to search it out to set up those scenarios, but I feel like that's just more of a, if it pops up, then it will pop up and I need to set it up. Because ideally, I just have a bunch of 1-attackers and he can't deal with it anyway. The biggest highlight will be if I can get out Trifernal, and then on the next turn, if it's through Blazer's effect or on the same turn that I hard ascend into it, I can just set up this combo and really put the pressure on Moxie. Moving over to the counter runes, I run 3 copies of Gorgon's Gaze, 3 copies of Helios' Cherry Ride, and 3 Poison Tipped Arrow. So only 9 counter runes. That is a small amount, but to be fair, against Mill, I don't think I really need that many, and these are going to be the ones that are the most effective. So my thought process is I want to run the ones that actually matter in that matchup, and then slot in other cards which can also matter in this matchup than necessarily fit in more counter runes just because usually that's objectively better. So of course, Gorgon's Gaze can be great against really anything. Stops attacks, it can stop Astrabbit from searching, it can stop Humbust's mill, it can stop Cinder from being able to mill. Just a very flexible utility card, hence why it's at 3 copies, and just has general utility even against Thunder. Helios' Cherry Ride is more specific to the mill matchup, and thus if Moxie switches over to Thunder, most likely I'll be cutting this, but just being able to, if I can't answer a Humbust, be able to flip this up on the opponent's turn and just stall a turn where Moxie can't cast runes to then trigger the mill, that sounds really strong to me. Sure, it cost me 2 spirits, but I don't care. He's not pressuring my spirit deck necessarily, so just being able to slow that down will be great, and I can leverage it on my turn if it ends up not coming up yet to be able to safely establish a Blazerus or even a Trifernal. Just being able to shut down those counter runes, unless, like, obviously Moxie can chain stuff to the Helios' Chariot Rite to try to stop some Ascensions, but at the same time, doesn't have it or doesn't choose to use it. That just lets me safely do those plays or even just build a wider board and take out those mill options as well. So I think this will have a lot of great utility in this matchup. And 3 Poison Tipped Arrow, just because this is also going to be great when Moxie's playing some Solar Elestrals, being able to just say, all right, sure, you get to mill me 2 on a Humbust, but I guarantee get rid of it at the end of the turn, meaning you're hard capped at up to 4 times per turn on that mill and nothing more. That sounds pretty good to me. This also is great against an Astrabbit, and since I've got some larger Elestrals, it may also be relevant against Cinder as well. But I also like this card because into the Thunder matchup, this is great against Icirrus, which I'm really very terrified of, but I'll get more into that when I'm talking about siding. And then finishing up the deck, we've got the Invoke Runes. I run 2 Ambrosia, 3 Resting on Your Laurels, and the 1 Rise from the Ashes. So the 2 Ambrosia is more so out of fear for running into the Thunder matchup, because there I'm going to really want to recover some spirits. But in the Mill matchup, probably won't come up, and thus I'll be cutting it. But also, I don't want to just... I know I'm saying preparing for Mill, but this kind of ties into I'm terrified of getting it wrong and running into Thunder and just kind of being caught completely unprepared. So I don't think this hurts me in the Mill matchup. In fact, this can help me recur some specific spirits if Moxie tries to mix it up and maybe splashes in some more burn stuff to put pressure on my spirits as well. This can come in handy, but also in the Thunder matchup, obviously, this is going to be really great to make sure I can stick in it, even though my Elestrals are super efficient, but, you know, Thunder, I'm going to need all the spirits I can get. But Resting on Your Laurels, this can be relevant in the Mill matchup as well if Moxie sets up 2 Elestrals while keeping me off of being able to deal with them. Resting on Your Laurels can become live to snipe a Humbust. I mean, sure, I still have to mill 2, but that's whatever. Cinder, Astrabbit that I'm struggling to hit over, whatever. It's just a good emergency button if I need it, though I'm probably going to side it out because I don't think it's super necessary. My attacker should just be able to deal with those millers. But in the Thunder matchup, this is going to be another crucial card because I'm so scared of Icirrus. Just in the event that Moxie plays Icirrus and then I can't attack that turn, if it's like, especially if it's turn 1, I might not even have PTA. Well, I can't have PTA turn 1. I might not have PTA turn 1. Just being able to pass it back, and the moment that another Elestral is established, as long as I've got nothing on board, I can Laurels that Icirrus and start attacking again. This ends, cool, Laurels. That's my answer to the Moxie's Ascensions as well. So this is going to be crucial for that matchup, and I left it at 3 copies over Ambrosia. I did originally have this swapped around, but that's just because Restaurant of the Laurels I think has more value in the Mill matchup than Ambrosia does, and therefore I think since I want both of them at 3 for Thunder, it makes more sense to run it this way since I expect Mill. Finally, Rise from the Ashes. This is more my fun choice because if Moxie is milling me, there's a chance he's going to mill my Blazeruses and Trifernals, and just being able to rise from one of them and just say, hey, deal with this. That might be the difference between me winning and losing. So it's a bit wary on the spirit total it will cost me, but at the same time, I do think in mill it will be worth it because, again, the pressure isn't put on my spirits, it's on my deck count. So just having a huge just bomb like that, punishing Moxie for milling my deck, I think could be really fun and very impactful. As for the spirits, I run 8 Leviathan and 12 Vipyro. I am going a bit higher on the Vipyro because my deck is primarily fire focused as well as my side deck, as you'll see. And just to make sure I have fuel for Trifernal if I ever get it out. And the water package is a bit more lean, so I think the 8 water spirits will be fine. I've got a bit more flexibility with it, and of course I've got Ambrosias if need be. As for the side deck, I run 3 copies of the Kinleo, 3 copies of the Earthseer, really excited for this one, 2 Veritaqua, 3 Tsunami, and the extra Ambrosia here. So I think it's just so important to put these in the context of what cards am I siding out, because that's how I built this side deck here. So Kinleo is here for the Thunder matchup because I want as many ways to deal with Icirrus and still be able to attack, deal with big scary Imperials, Galvanoms, Sonicores, you name it. That's also why I think the 3 Hephaestus was great in the deck, just be able to side in Kinleo to deal with it. So mainly Kinleo will be replacing the Volcaries in my deck because I do think the situational attack gain on Volcaries won't really matter much. I'd rather just the hard removal to be able to deal with those Threatening Thunder Elestrals. So that's the plan with that one. Earthseer is actually for the Mill matchup, and I plan on siding out the Resting on Your Laurels for it, or really 2 Ambrosia and a Resting on Your Laurels, however you want to look at it. I don't expect to need these as much, and Ursir is just kind of a fun option here that will fulfill the same purpose, because most likely I expect to be up on the board. I don't expect Moxie to really be able to establish multiple Elestrals a lot of the time, and I really just want good attackers to pressure, and Ursir is great at that. It at 3 attack can hit over a Humbust. That's about it, but still, that's another option. It can help me save my bigger attackers for stuff like Astrabbit and Cinder, and just be able to throw down an Ursir and pressure that Humbust and potentially spawn another bear. Builds me a wider board. It puts more damage to the Spirit deck, which Moxie will not like, and all in all, just seems like a solid option. So definitely slotting in 3 of these if he's on mill for game 2s, and 3 just for that fun tech. Arguably, it's not the best one. I can see an argument for it, but it's also super fun, and I just want to do it, and I do think the theory is there. 2 Veritaqua, again for the Thunder matchup, because I'll be siding in Tsunami. It'll just help me deal with bigger bodies, or even just any Elestral in general, especially once he sets up a stadium. I don't necessarily want to crash with Nekruff, so being able to take advantage of Tsunami and a Veritaqua, or just Veritaqua into a Astrabbit seems pretty good. And if I can stall out and keep my Veritaqua around on Icirrus, again, it outs it. So this card will be going in for the Trifernal and one of the Mustachians here. And that's because Trifernal can be useful in that matchup, but also with so much removal, I think it will be a bit, what's the word I'm looking for here? Greedy or naive, hopeful. Pretty much, I don't think it's realistic that I'll get into Trifernal. It will stick and do enough damage. I think it will be better to focus on other things than that one. Still want to leave in the 2 Blazers because they're great pressure tools that can hit high numbers, which I really like. And just to kind of blow out the game from there against Thunder, I think I do need more of these swingy tools, even if he can easily answer it. But being able to connect 4 damage to face potentially, or even just deal with an Elestral in 2, even if it gets answered, I think that's totally worth it as long as it has that output. And then the Mustachian here, I think just gets a bit too expensive for the Thunder matchup. And I've got plenty of other answers to stuff like Astrabbit, and ideally I'll be wanting to utilize some of my other tools to out if he's got Stadium and like Elechick and whatnot. So don't necessarily want to rely on the 6 attack here. This is also kind of dependent. This is probably the option I am shakiest for, and there's a strong chance I might just say, nope, I'm keeping the 2 Mustachian and just siding out the 1 Trifernal for a Veritaqua. I can always take out a Blazers if I feel like it as well. So even though I'm saying this now, the more I actually say it, the more I'm just like, is that the best idea? Because sometimes that 6 attack might come up, but I'll figure it out in game. I really don't think it will come up. We'll see. If I lose to this, I'm going to be annoyed. But moving right along to Tsunamis, kind of heals the Chariot Ride. This just kind of delays the inevitable with Thunder, which is not good enough. I'd rather just the Battle Trick to keep my opponent off of when he goes wide, just be able to stave off some of that damage, put it into more advantageous positions for my Elestrals to attack over, as Thunder has, with Elechick and Jolteon are probably going to be the main attackers, and they got low defense, meaning it's easier to attack over. Synergize as well with Veritaqua. And finally, the 1 Ambrosia, getting rid of this Rise from the Ashes. It's cool, but it uses too many spirits, so I'd rather just the Recover 3. As I've mentioned throughout this deck profile, the strategy of this deck is just to use big attackers that try to be as efficient as possible to pressure Moxie's Elestrals, keep him off of his mill tools, and in the case of Thunder, if he pivots over to that, just be able to contest those with the least amount of spirits as possible to try to not get out-controlled there, while also having just a fun hop end in Blazers and Trifernal to do fun stuff. So ideally, I can just literally just out-tempo, out-grind my opponent. We'll see if it works out, but I am happy with a lot of the prep and thought process that went into this deck, as I did pivot around through a lot of ideas and finally settled on this, and I do think it has a really great shot at beating Mill, and frankly against Thunder, I'm not confident in my chances. That deck is so strong, so consistent, so frustrating, but I think there's at least a decent, competent strategy to face off against Thunder the best I can, to at least give me the smallest chance of winning. But now I want to hear from you all. What are your thoughts on my deck this week? Do you think I'm on the mark for being able to counter Mill? And what do you think about how this deck will do against Thunder? I'm really curious to hear your thoughts down below. And if you've enjoyed this video, please consider leaving a like, subscribing, and turning on the notification bell so you're notified when I do upload more content. You can also find all my fellow ECL participants' channels linked down in the description below. Everything Elestrals, aka Moxie, will be right at the top to make sure it's easy to find since he is my opponent this week. You can also find a link to the playlist with all my ECL content down in the description below and up in the card above. But with that being said though, look forward to my ECL match coming out tomorrow and more content coming out real soon.